Let's get this show on the road. This is Justin back for another episode of Real Estate Playbook. We're going to talk about understanding the money. We're going to be talking about this all month. We're going to spend time diving into the subtleties that separate good agents from bad agents. We're going to dive into the things that allow you to help create clarity for your buyers and for your sellers. And so right now I'm reading a book called The Psychology of Money. I've read it, but it's been many, many years. It's an amazing book. And so we're going to dive into some things from that book. One of the things that strikes me, and it happens early in the book, but it really lays a really good groundwork, is it talks about the difference of luck and risk, because the two always go hand in hand. You could do everything right and still get a different outcome than someone else. Why is that the case? But here's the question. If you can't control luck, what can you control? If you cannot control your luck, what can you control? How do you even assess your risk if you can't control your luck? But this is where it connects for me, because most agents, they live in the story. The market's tough, or the rates are high, the inventory is low, and that's all real, but it's also noise, right? Because there are things that we can control. The best agents I know, they're not guessing. They're not hoping. Sometimes you look for a little luck. They don't feel their way through the deals. They understand the numbers. They understand what it takes to be great, to create clarity for their customers. In the book, it's so interesting. It goes through a little bit about Bill Gates. And, the question in the book is just proposed, how did Bill Gates get rich? They say, well, the high school he went to had one of the first computers, like just by happenstance, right? He would not have had the opportunity to become obsessed with ultimately what would change the world without being at that particular school. Was that luck? Or would a lot of people in that scenario have become Bill Gates? It's just the question, right? He had a partner that they knew each other through school, and they worked together. They stayed up late nights working and building on these computers. And apparently he died in some kind of climbing or hiking accident. Was that luck? Was it an unnecessary risk that he took being there? What was it? What would he have become given the same opportunities that later presented themselves to Bill Gates? A lot of the same upbringing, a lot of the same. And this is where we find ourselves, is we find ourselves with a lot of people with the same access to information, the same opportunities in front of them, maybe equally as good in front of people, charismatic, the ability to work a room, to prospect, to speak to people intelligently. But what separates the pack? What separates the top 1% in the real estate industry? So a seller sitting at their table trying to determine how they are going to go about making a move. Can they afford it? What's it really going to cost me? What is my real equity position? What is my real, net after I sell that I can take to the next house? Is it worth it? Should I keep it and run it? Would that be worth it? And too many agents burn out. They never make it to that next level because they get lost in this moment by not having the ability to create clarity for those sellers. Because it's too often that we emote with them. We share in that. We don't provide clarity. We just relate. And maybe they like you. Maybe they like you a lot. Maybe you're a great agent. But you're missing a piece of the puzzle that otherwise, to some from the outside looking in, would say, well, he's just gotten luckier with some better sellers, or he's gotten luckier with some better buyers. In reality, he created better clarity that allowed buyers to operate. And buyers and sellers that have clarity, they're direct. They know what they're looking for. They know what they're not looking for. I mean, it just looks like the perfect client from the outside looking in. They were just easy. Why is Scotty Scheffler or Rory McIlroy so much more likely to hole out a chip than me? Same reason, right? Is it luck? No, not at all. Not a bit. I don't play as much as they do. Not nearly enough. So we could stand there all day and I might never make it in. And the margin of error from each one of their chips is going to be so tight compared to what I can do, right? That's what we're looking for in this industry. We need the hours, the thousands of hours and understanding and training required to have a margin of error like Scotty and Rory and Tiger and the greats. Talk about golf because it's just after Masters weekend. So I want you to be able to go deep. I want you to understand, have the ability to express clearly, here's what you're going to net. Here's what's going to happen if we price here. Here's what's not going to happen if we price here. How do we know that? Facts, experience, details. Here's what happens if we wait. Here's what it looks like if you keep it as a rental. We want to move ourselves from salesperson to advisor. We are their strategist. We are their rock when things get rough. The same goes with buyers. Bank tells them you're approved. Cool. There's a logical understanding there. Cool. Got that. Had a conversation with someone today that said the lender that they had reached out to, not one directed by our agent, but the lender they reached out to gave them a number that was a lot less than they expected it to be, and they've just ghosted after that. We wanted a house that was about this price. We got a pre-approval for this. Obviously, we can't afford it. Gone. How was that pre-approval decided? How was that number decided? Were they planning for HOAs? What were they expecting for taxes? Like, we've got to understand the inner workings of how that is done so that we can either help bring clarity to the why and help them create a plan, or shoot holes in it and press for other better options. So I want to jump into a scenario, because if luck and risk are always in the background, then the person who creates the most clarity, especially in a tumultuous market like we're in, a volatile somewhat market, some would say, that agent has the unfair advantage every time. Every time. They can be beat, but they are coming in with an advantage over 90% of agents without question. I'm going to jump into our title company's title capture. Shout out to Apex. But just so you can see it, this is what I use when working to create clarity for sellers. Now, sometimes it goes outside of this page too. Sometimes we take the information from here and we work it from there, right? We create maybe even an easier to digest scenario. There's not much more you can do here, but we want to create an easy to digest scenario. So let's go with a sample example. So in this, we're going to be able to create just a seller net sheet, right? So we're going to go with, let's see, just pick an address locally. Okay. If the buyer is purchasing with financing, why does that matter? Matters. We want to understand it. They could be purchasing with cash. Generally, it's going to change small amount, but some of the closing costs, for what would be pushed to the buyer. Now, when we're creating these examples, this is a seller net sheet, but you can move these into Alta settlement, examples, a loan estimate, whatever. Get a lot of options here. So we're sitting there with the seller, and we need to help them understand, based on the walkthrough, based on where we expect this to sell, what they're actually going to be able to walk away with. We're going to give them an expected sale price. Now, we can come back and tweak this so we can work a range. We're going to be able to give them a closing date. Why does closing date matter? Closing date matters because we're going to have our prorations. Prorations are the expenses on the house that hit at a different time of the month. So an example would be our taxes. Taxes are paid annually. And so the buyer's going to pay for the taxes the time in which they live in the house that year, and the seller's going to pay for it. So that's a split that's got to happen. So that's what we're working on, kind of dividing down. So if someone has not yet paid their taxes, their equity position may be lower than they expected, creating clarity. So we could come in here and we can say default for state. Cool. We're picking out our kind of how things are split. I'm going to leave that there. There's nothing there. Let's say there's a loan amount of $525,000. It's never that round, but sometimes maybe it's going to be close. We've got real estate comp. What do you charge? This needs to be in here. Charge 3%. We're going to be generous. Make sure the buyer's agent. Now, the question of the day, this is what's always asked. Well, what are you offering? Right now, my answer is I am more than happy to pay whatever you and your buyer have agreed to if we can work it out in a deal. Do people love that? No, but it works. But I tell them, other than that, we're penciling in 2.5%. So I kind of prime them for the 2.5% number with our buyer based on our numbers. Okay. So if they come in $100,000 low, guess what? Unfortunately, it's not going to work. You're going to have to negotiate that a little better, or pay it, have your buyer pay it. Right. If you come in at 775, dude, like, name your price. Like, I am so priming my seller to make the decision based on their net walk away. Like, we want to get them as much as we can, but their net matters. Their net matters more than what they pay the buyer's broker. Okay. So I'm passionate about that in this sense, because it's something we're talked about. We're asked about. I've been asked about it I think 5 times today based on agents calling, asking what we're paying. Okay. We only do direct from seller compensation to buyer broker. We don't do broker to broker. It's an EXP standard. So just so you know kind of how we approach this, that's how we're approaching this. Seller concession. There could be a seller concession. I'm not going to work that in right now. Let's just say there's no HOA here. And then we're actually going to be able to autofill property taxes. This is going to go fetch the data. You could go to the property site yourself if you wanted to and pull it. And so now I have, and then if you had any other seller expenses or credits, you could put that in here. So what we've got is a very clear example of what they will see at closing if we can go get 750, right? We've got to understand the working mechanisms here, of how we get to a walk away with 166 kind of number. We've got our sale price. We've got our closing fee. We've got our owner's title insurance policy based on purchase price. We've got our title lien search. We've got our municipal lien search. We've got our doc stamps on the deed. We've got our first loan being paid off. We've got listing side and buyer side compensation. And we've got our estimated county taxes leaving us with a net of 166,680. Now, sometimes sellers are considering making a sale based on a scenario of where they want to go. And I say sometimes kind of tongue in cheek because don't you have to know where you're going to go, generally speaking? So I want to make sure we are talking about that. Where are you going? How are you getting there? What's the process like? What do you envision at the next place? How much do we need from this house to get you where you want to be? As much as we can. Got it. Where's that line? Let me help you determine that line. Like, I want to understand the whole picture before I'm signing up a listing agreement. Because I tell you, it's a surefire way to have a listing agreement, pictures, and you're sitting here for 180 days. Nobody comes to the door, and it's your fault because you did not create clarity. Had a agent from across the country call me today. It's a family member of his that the agent has been sitting on the market at a price that it's never going to sell. They've had calls. He's determining as the family member that it is most likely a negative equity situation, meaning they either just need to plan to rent it forever or short sell it forever until it recovers. She's like, well, I didn't know they were that pressed, says the agent. You've got to talk to your people. You've got to help them see. You got to help them understand. Like, it's not fun just to have listings. I know a lot of people want to get into the listing game. I'm just going to go pursue more listings. I get it. I get that's the goal. I get that's where you envision seeing yourself. But the reality is you've got to learn a lot before you get there. You got to be able to create clarity here. Let me move this to one other quick scenario. Let's say that same scenario, we need to minimum walk away with $125,000. This is a fun way to do this because we can get ourselves to a place. I said 525 payoff. We can get ourselves to a place where we can kind of create the floor of where we need to be price-wise. Sometimes this is the best tool to back into what's going to get us there, and then we're going to go dictate our bottom line. Like, help the seller understand where that line is. Everybody's got a line somewhere. Help them understand. Autofill taxes here, and then let's calculate. So in this scenario, what we're doing is we're calculating a sale price that will net us where we need to be. So we were at 750. Now it's saying recommended sale price 705, 573 to allow us to net just over 125,000. It's a big difference. What if that seller in conversation with you understands that they're moving from a house that maybe we can sell at that price. It's got a lot of, deferred maintenance coming down the line, a lot of big projects. And they're sitting there saying, we don't have the cash. We got good equity. We don't have the cash to do those things. And we want to move ourselves into a house that has a longer time horizon before we have to start doing all that work. Maybe a better overall asset to own. Like, we're going to move. We've done really well in this house. And there's a lot of people in this position. We've done really well in this house with a dose of luck, to draw back to our earlier conversation. A dose of luck. I didn't choose to buy this house at that time. It just so worked out that way. We've had this amazing run in the real estate market. Imagine doing that in stocks. You take a run on a speculative stock. There comes a point where it's time to sell speculative stock because living in speculative world is challenging. You move it into a blue chip. Sometimes people need to move their primary house from speculative to blue chip. Let's go to an area that is solid, something that's been done, something I'm not going to need to touch for 15 years, right? Scenarios allow or are able to play themselves out, and we can help people get to this understanding if we are better at understanding the process as a whole. So, hope this is helpful. We're going to dive into some very specific scenarios moving forward in the next over the next couple weeks. We're going to be doing it in all of our team meetings, on all of our school modules that we're putting out. So jump on. I haven't talked about it enough on here, but get on we've got the Real Estate Playbook School, SKOOL. We do our lives on there. We create classrooms with modules on this kind of stuff. So we're going to go deep on this so that you are an absolute expert at creating clarity for the customer. Have a great day.